We are pleased to welcome back a good friend of ours. Welcome back to the studio, and welcome back from Afghanistan, Congressman Joe Courtney from Connecticut. Hi, Congressman.
Hey, Bill. Good to be here.
Good to see you. Glad you made it back safely.
The Boehner schedule, we have a little time in our hands, so it's nice to come and pop in and visit.
Well, I realize that John Boehner gives you guys so much free time, right? That we
not like there's a few things we ought to be doing.
We want to help you fill that time. Yeah, exactly. And as you're joining the team that you know well by now, Peter Ogburn and Dan Henning, with our newest member, Alicia Cruz, on the phones, and Cyprian Bolding, as always, on the video cam. Congressman, you have children, right?
I do.
Grown? Right.
One just finished college, another one's about to enter. So the student loan, higher ed affordability issue is very fresh.
Yeah, indeed. And I have children and Peter, and so, you know, we identify with a question that Savannah Guthrie asked the president down at the White House. Now, your daughters, the teenage daughters, now, what if they want to come, what if they say, hey, we decided we're going to get a tattoo? The president, he's got that all figured out. Here he is.
Michelle and I have used this strategy when it comes to things like tattoos. What we've said to the girls is, if you guys ever decide you're going to get a tattoo, then Mommy and me will get the exact same tattoo in the same place, and we'll go on YouTube and show it off as a family tattoo. And our thinking is that might dissuade them from thinking that somehow that's a good way to rebel.
That is brilliant.
Yeah,
are you kidding me?
I think
that
it's a great idea.
What a stroke of genius.
No, isn't that pretty smart?
Yes.
I'm totally stealing that parenting advice.
Yeah, because, you know, if mom and dad have the same thing, I mean, it's not so cool after all, right?
That is great.
I love it.
Indeed. By the way, Senator Dick Durbin will be joining us just a little bit later in the broadcast as well, who is out in front on with member of the Gang of Eight on immigration reform, and Senator Durbin holding a big hearing yesterday on drones, also over in the Senate. So, Congressman, back from Afghanistan, why did you go and what did you find?
Well, I'm on the Armed Services Committee, and, you know, when you step back and look at armed services issues, I mean, this still should be our number one focus. 66,000 troops still deployed over in Afghanistan.
That many left. I didn't realize that.
Again, the timeline is they're coming down to 34,000 by February, and then, you know, total end of combat mission by December 2014.
Right,
correct.
2014, right.
So, but, you know, the downward trend started already because we were at about roughly 100,000 troops even last year. So, you know, a couple things. Number one, just to sort of get an update in terms of, you know, what the plan is in terms of transition. You know, I think there's some positive feedback we got, but very sort of cold-eyed, you know, realism coupled with it. You know, fighting season, which always sort of coincides with warm weather over in Afghanistan, is really just about to go into full pitch. And the transition plan now for this year is that basically the Afghan military, which is at about 350,000 strength, is going to be completely in the lead. There's not going to be any partnering with U.S. Forces. There will be sort of a train and assist backup, but the fact is that this summer they're really going to have to kind of ride the bike without training wheels. And, you know, again, we met with the head of the 101st Airborne, General McConville from Quincy, Massachusetts, who obviously was watching events in Boston extremely closely. And he made it very clear that, you know, they're not going to just respond to every, you know, call for help out there by the Afghan troops. So this is actually, you know, again, something that while there still are forces there, you know, going to be kind of the test run in terms of their capability. I mean, the other thing that I have to share with you that was quite sort of tangible proof of the drawdown is that we went to the depot where all of this equipment is just flowing in from all the forward operating bases that are being closed or handed off. And, I mean, the volume of stuff.
This is now surplus, I guess,
absolutely.
right?
I mean, we're talking, you know, just massive parking lots full of Humvees, MRAPs, Stryker vehicles, warehouses with everything from air conditioning equipment, communications equipment, tents. It's just going to be this.
So what happens to all that stuff?
Well, they're packing it up and they're
Are they bringing
it
it back?
They are. And so, one thing that
they'll
actually
have a fire sale, or they'll just store it and use it for future operations.
It's
or what?
interesting. Well, the statute, the law basically says that, again, the military gets first dibs in terms of claiming any of it, and they will. I mean, particularly the military vehicles, which but there's things like fire trucks, for example, where state and local governments, by law, actually have a right to claim it if. But there's no searchable database that exists out there, and that's something that as we do the markup on the defense bill in a couple weeks. Staff and I are going to be working on that. I mean, and it's funny. There was one story in Connecticut, which I sort of talked about this a little bit. Our office has gotten swamped with calls from local governments who, are looking at, their own capital budgets as far as, this may sound kind of mundane, but the fact of the matter is we're talking billions of dollars in material that's going to be coming stateside as part of, what's happening. It's 12 years of equipment and material that has piled up over there. And
could any of it ever go to open to the public? I mean, where they have a, like sometimes they do with, you see government vehicles, used government vehicles, they have an auction and people can go buy them, and some of them are in good shape.
That's right, because, at the end of the day, they're just going to cut it up and, scrap it, which, it would be a terrible waste. And again, we're walking through the depot here. We're not talking about junk. I mean, this stuff was, they pretty much sort out the stuff that is, not worth the cost of transportation, because obviously, taking a boat from Pakistan to California or whatever is not cheap. But again, with containers, ships full of stuff is already actually flowing back here. And it's. These guys are amazing in terms of just the system that they have set up to handle this is it's really impressive. And
did you have come away with any confidence that when we move out, that the government of Afghanistan is going to be able to step up and govern the entire country, not just the city of Kabul?
Well, I would say this. I mean, first of all, we went down to Kandahar in the south, which obviously was the home of the Taliban, and some pretty heavy fighting in the last 2 years there. It is actually pretty sort of stable right now, and clearly the governance is pretty extensive there. The other thing they've been focusing on is the Afghan local police program, which is a way of trying to localize sort of security and frankly not tie it so closely to the national government in Kabul to sort of create some sort of grassroots sustainable security situations there. But I mean, I guess to get to the heart of your question, there's an election coming up in Afghanistan. Karzai is not running again.
That's right.
Even despite rumors that he might try and stay, I mean, that's not happening. And I mean, that's the other part of the transition, as you point out, is just governance. It's not just enough to have, guys in uniforms.
Right,
I mean, you've got to have them connected to.
And they've never had a central government in Afghanistan.
Well, certainly that has had, full reach.
Right.
And, but again, I would say that there has been some improvement again in terms of just that issue. But the election is really going to be critical question, and obviously the disaster.
So what kind of a presence will we have after December 2014?
That's the big debate. The president has really not spit it out yet in terms of what they're talking about. Again, there's different scenarios. One of which would be just like Iraq, where you'd have virtually zero. We're not going to have 34,000 troops, which is where we'll be, in 2014. Some speculation is roughly about 5,000 to 6,000, with some special forces, maybe a couple thousand special forces, some support logistics, and some trainers after 2014. The Tokyo conference basically. There was pledges by a lot of Western nations, NATO nations, to provide some funds for the Afghan government, because it's still going to need external help. I mean, this is not a country whose economy can sustain, with tax revenue, a full government. And I think that's important. It should not be like in the 1990s when we just sort of headed for the exits once the Russians left.
Right. Were you able to move around freely? Did you see people moving around freely? I mean, is it sort of an open society, markets open, restaurants open? Yeah.
Fourth trip over there, and this time, I mean, it was SUVs, no helmets. When we were sort of moving in some parts, they asked us to put body armor on, the vests.
Yeah.
But I mean, in past trips, the security was much more intense that was there. And so pulling out of Kabul airport when we flew in that night, we came around the corner and there was this massive wedding center with huge lights. It looked like it was something in Vegas, that was there. Yeah. And again, it's still a very poor country, very undeveloped, but there was no question that there was some vibrancy to the downtown.
Yeah. Good to hear. And you got to go over there to see for yourself, right?
Yeah, it helps.
Now,
I saw some people why are you guys doing this? But I actually think, particularly as markup approaches with HASC, it's a good thing.
Sure, especially for members of the committee. I want to ask you about something coming back home here. Congressman Joe Courtney, our guest here in studio. Yesterday, I'd like to understand exactly what's going on. Eric Cantor announces he's going to bring to the floor a measure to show that Republicans really do care about poor people and about people who need health care. And so this is a measure that's going to allow people who have pre-existing conditions to buy into Obamacare without getting into all the details.
Right.
And then he ended up pulling the bill and not going for a vote. What happened?
Well, again, it just shows that, the governing caucus of the House of Representatives is incapable of really fashioning any kind of agenda, even for something as, minimalist as a high-risk pool, which is, really not a good solution for people who have pre-existing conditions.
They have to buy into the high-risk pool in order to get coverage,
which,
right?
Anyone can just sort of basic insurance principles. When you concentrate, people with high risk, it's adverse selection and the prices go through the roof. In Connecticut, which has a high-risk pool, we've actually had it since the 70s. The premium is about $400 a month for a single person. And, it's funny because the Republicans are going to be, and you mark my words here, when the exchanges go online in the fall, they're going to be screaming about rate shock and high insurance premiums. None of them will be as high as the high risk pool that Cantor was pushing yesterday. So it's really not a good solution, but even that sort of minimalist attempt collapsed.
Because of the opposition of Democrats? Or
no, well, the Democrats opposed it because there's a pay-for with this where they were just taking it out of another part of the Affordable Care Act, that prevention and primary care, which is, everyone knows is the smart way to bring down health care costs. But so the Democrats were, totally, off limits as far as supporting it. And then, dozens of Tea Party Republicans rebelled. And Club for Growth, all the sort of usual suspects lined up against it, and they pulled the bill.
Another way, kind of proving that the Tea Partiers did not go along with the leadership, even when they tried were trying to look reasonable here. It was a bad plan, but trying to look reasonable. And shows who's in charge over there in the House.
Couldn't shoot straight.
I know, it is, yeah. Congressman Joe Courtney here with us. When we come back, remember, he is the man who took on the entire entertainment industry, and Steven Spielberg. How's he doing in that battle? We'll find out from Lincoln Joe here when we come back.
This is the Bill Press Show. This is the Full Court Press. The Bill Press Show, live on your radio and on Current TV.
25 minutes after the hour here on the Full Court Press in Connecticut. They call him 3-Sub Joe. In Hollywood, we can't repeat what they call him because he dared challenge a major factual inaccuracy in misrepresentation in the movie Lincoln. Congressman Joe Courtney. Congressman, before we get to that, Peter's got a quick comment.
If you're not a fan of George W. Bush, today might not be your day to watch a lot of TV because all the morning shows are talking about Bush and the Bush Library. They have interviews with Bush
and what
himself
a wonderful president he was.
And family members,
spoon.
So Barbara Bush, mother Bush,
yes.
Was giving an interview this morning, and someone asked her about her son Jeb, whether or not he should run for president in 2016. And she immediately said, no, we've had enough Bushes.
Wow.
So even his mother doesn't want him to run.
That's funny. His brother does.
His brother does.
George W. said
but mommy doesn't.
Wow. So, Congressman, what happened with Lincoln? First of all, just so everybody knows, they misrepresented that the people in Connecticut, you saw a movie. When you saw a movie, you were shocked to learn that Connecticut voted against this amendment.
Right, the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery.
Which, in fact, they did not vote against. They voted for. So you demanded a retraction or a correction. What, did you get it?
We did not. We got an acknowledgement that I was right. But really at that point, this is back in February, although the movie had been out since October, and my wife and I were watching it in an almost empty theater at that point, and the roll call, which was really the climactic scene of the movie. I mean, when you think about it, the movie was really about whipping the vote.
Right.
You know, for abolishing slavery, which is a pretty big deal. And, Connecticut, just for the record, had abolished slavery itself back in the 1840s, had emancipated children of slaves in the 1790s.
Wow.
And had over 4,000 more dead, on the Union cause. So anyway, I'm sitting there, and as a congressman, I'm sitting there going, I mean, even if, there were sympathizers in Connecticut, politically, voting against the 13th Amendment and Lincoln, who had carried Connecticut twice, I mean, that just makes absolutely no sense. So I'm home on Wikipedia and Google, and my wife's like, what are you doing? Go to bed, and everything like that. But sure
I can't let this go. Yeah.
And so the whole delegation had voted yes. And great people, by the way. I mean, the Wall Street Journal actually did a profile of the Connecticut members that were there. And, they were one guy from New London, Connecticut, which I represent, was a good friend of Lincoln's, was a police court judge who had emancipated a slave in the 1850s when he was brought before the court. So again, it was kind of just a silly mistake.
I normally think that when movies make these mistakes and people demand a retraction, it can be kind of silly. I think that sometimes this was a real this was fact, and it's you have to get that right.
But they could have corrected it before the DVD went out, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and Ken Burns, by the way, did that for the movie that he did about World War II, because he misrepresented the hometown of the brothers who were the family in Iowa who lost all.
But Hollywood refused to do it.
So
Spielberg refused?
He did. And so we're going to actually do a companion piece for schools who show this movie. So that at least there's an opportunity.
All right. Good for you. Yeah. Fighting Joe Courtney, Congressman, in studio with us. Thanks for coming in, Congressman.
Great to be here.
Great work.
This is the Bill Press Show.